All right. So you had initiated a conversation based off of uh, this issue here, bit of a
Mm,
placeholder issue right now. Um, I assume based off of the work that we have been doing already from other related issues and teams, you kind of wanted to jump in. So just to kind of give you an overview of what's going on here, this is kind of like the primary issue. Again, it's kind of a placeholder right now.
mm,
I am trying to figure out a framework that I can create for all of the groups and stages to take ownership of their individual feature and associated permissions, um, in an effort to bring them to the customizable RBAC work that we're doing. It doesn't make any sense for auth to do the totality of the permissions, because we don't have the insight specific to users, job to be done, flows, et cetera, for particular features and how those features interact. And that's kind of where the Figma work that I had started over here with Amelia in terms of grouping the permissions based off of category in the docs. So I went through an effort of trying to recategorize everything based off of an example here, how they flow logically, based on the idea that if you were to disable something, how would that impact permissions down the line? Um, you had mentioned your section, where to go,
repository.
repository, you were just there.
Mhm.
So this was my first pass at it. The next step is for your team to validate the proposal and make any corrections based on what they see here in its first pass. As an example, one of the things we want to do is reduce redundancy or reduce overlap with permissions. So
Mhm.
as an example here, manage push rules, manage group push rules. Why are these two different permissions? Doesn't it make sense to just make that one permission in the database? So
Mm,
looking at all of these and finding any sorts of instances where perhaps unifying or reducing permission complexity and
mm,
any sort of investigation subsequent impacts into that. We
mm.
are already doing an MVC of merging. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Oh, 1 second. I should put that in the agenda. This one. This is our first MVC to view pipeline and view pipeline details. We're going to merge those as one.
Mhm.
So this process, we want to document, create a framework for that. This process, we're trying to create a framework for all the UXers based off of this categorization. And then as an example, the CI/CD team we went through and spoke about this. And so this is kind of just in flux right now. Like I said, I want to try and document this as a framework for every team to take over and continue
Mm.
this work for their particular stage. So as you mentioned in your concern here, I would say that from your perspective, I think you're free to do what you need in order to make changes. But
Mm.
like I said, we're not really in the stage right now to guide or implement anything apart from that one that we're working on, because we have to test it to see what happens
Yeah.
and if anything blows up.
Yep. Sounds good. And so when you say test and to see if anything blows up, what is that?
So in regards to this, we want to see if something breaks from these sorts of groupings or mergings
Mm.
within the system, like, oh, okay, so now because this logic has existed in the past where you have these two separate permissions, does that work after we've merged those permissions? So presumably everything should be fine, but we want to make sure that we're doing, pretty aggressive quality control and post work validation of the process. Specifically because this is permissions and we don't want any sort of security concerns to pop up that we didn't expect beforehand. And that's kind of, again, where I was saying that I want to try and create a framework where all teams will be able to go through a process and build off of that for their own individual needs. And then the subsequent follow-up post QA work to be done with the devs. And from a user perspective for the UX team, do users find these changes that we're proposing beneficial based off of every particular feature's permissions, right? Or opportunities to find new permissions or new features to integrate in the system, right? How would a new feature or a new enhancement integrate into this new idea that the permission is now customizable?
Cool. All right. So I saw your video, and like you said, you're kind of developing the framework, and you've been discussing with some groups, mainly CI/CD. I actually wanted to jump early in to be like another guinea pig to deal with this influx, because within the repository area, I'm a new designer, relatively like 6 months-ish in the group, and we're tackling this feature called branch rules, and it doesn't exist yet. But the fundamental idea of it is that there is a relationship between protected branches, merge request approvals, status checks, and maybe some other stuff. But those are the key ones. But they all revolve around branches. And the thing that I'm working on right now is creating, what we've done so far is we've created a view that allows you to see all the different settings around a branch in one place. So you don't need to jump to protect the branches and jump to the merge request page to look at the merge request approval and then jump to another page. It's just one place to see what's my settings for this branch. Makes a lot of sense. The next iteration and next step towards the final vision is actually editing from that one area. So I'm in that one area. I want to make a change. I want to add an extra merge request approval to this branch or whatever. The tricky part is now like editing that and then the rules and permissions around that, because we kind of flipped the model a little bit now, where it's like it used to be very separate, like you can edit merge request approvals, and now you're doing it from a branch perspective. So I am looking at this from two ways, where we have the current experience, and I'm trying to map that while trying to move forward with the new experience. And I think at the moment I'm trying to jump between both, and it's driving me crazy, because there are little weird things between the current experience where you can add overlapping rules and we don't do any validations or checks or anything like that. And you can set up contradicting rules and then there's no checks. Or there's stuff that's set at the group level that should cascade down. And then you can write overriding issue, like create your own custom rules that contradict that. So yeah, this is why I said this call is a little bit unstructured, because like these are just random thoughts, but I have different entry points to edit and change the rules and settings at a group level, at a project level. And there's edge cases with the API that you can do multiple things at once that don't exist in the UI. And yeah, I think that's just like mainly editing, whether cascade or not so much permissions, but that might, like, can you manage group rules or can you manage project rules? Like that feels like one of those permissions that you highlighted earlier. Hey, that looks like a rule that should be just merged into one in the database, but maybe there's a good rationale for keeping both because it's a different persona managing groups versus like an individual project. That's one concern. And yeah, cascading. Yeah. So yeah, in a nutshell, I don't have clarity on the current model. And then I kind of want to be your guinea pig and go through whatever framework, because it could help me define my own scenario. And then, yeah, then I can use that to apply it to the new scenario, because I'm actively working in this world right now. And yes, thank you for bringing up this this page here. Another issue that came up is whether people are allowed to click download on the repository page. There's a button on repositories. Oh yeah, that download project. Yeah, and there was a whole question about whether downloading a project is different than cloning a project or viewing it like on. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think, let me jump in real fast, because I think you might be confusing what you want to do versus what we're trying to do. So from what you describe, or from what I understand, to make sure I'm understanding, is that you want to maybe change some of these behaviors or permission linkings based on the feature that you're working on. And I think that's totally fine. The thing that RBAC is focused on is looking at these 5 that we have currently and what feature they have access to in this current model that exists, and allowing an admin to modify these to toggle a check where it did not exist before, to allow any sort of additional feature access that didn't exist in the past. So any sort of feature changes you make or propose, which would currently fall into these 5 roles, would still exist. However, you can change that based on what you find inconsistent or not logical in this example that I have here, or any sort of proposed improvement to a feature that you want to add. So as an example, I want to add a new permission that does something because I have a new feature that's coming out. That's totally fine, no problem. The main focus is understanding which role it would have normally been delegated to, and then offering an opportunity for that role to then toggle that checkbox to allow that, which it did not have in the past.
Gotcha. And that makes, yes, I can see how I kind of confused what I wanted to do. Where I also see that this might be helpful is just seeing that matrix that, like, if we do something new, or like, this could be a good way to just sense check that, hey, there's these other functionality that you need to be aware of. And yeah, okay.
Exactly. That's kind of what I was thinking in this visual mapping, is how can we correct or improve this, maybe even offer it as some sort of visual in our docs or something that shows the way that the permissions flow down through a feature. So if you're going to make a new feature or improve a feature, you can then remodel this table. Again, like I said, in its current iteration, it might already need more improvement or adjustment. Like I said, I don't have any linking to the start of this point. So where does this actually link from out externally? So thinking about that from a broader perspectives. So this should arguably be a living document. But again, like I said, using it as a guide for its initial stages of what can be improved, what's redundant, what features could probably be deleted or grouped. Are they not in the correct logical location? And that's sort of what this initial phase is for. When you say you wanted to be the guinea pig, I think that's what we're looking for right now, is validating this kind of flow or this sort of information architecture, finding those opportunities to reduce complexity and confusion, And then thinking about the future, what do you want from a new feature or a new iteration to a current feature that would improve or exist in this new information architecture that we want to offer, to where an admin can customize the access based off of any sort of particular user role that they want to create, right?
Yeah, I think another issue that I commonly run across is people or organizations who have guest roles, and they're like, oh, the guest role can't do enough. We just want them to be able to do X, Y, Z, just like a developer. So I guess that's where RBAC comes in, that they can go in and tick something.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically what the biggest request or the impetus for this project was, is that we had a number of organizations that would said that either the 5 permissions that exist currently are either too permissive or too restrictive. And this will offer those organizations to say, I want a guest to be able to view MRs or not view, or whatever sort of feature that they didn't necessarily have access to in the past. And giving those users or those admins and organizations that new custom flexibility.
Okay. Holding that thought for a while, is that like a scenario that I should be highlighting when I go through this? Because it'd be like this role that might, this scenario comes up quite often, that this level should get this permission, but we don't allow that, so that they can execute this flow here on the chart. Highlighting stuff like that would be helpful for your task, or
Yeah,
really.
So any example that you've had in your research or your interactions with users where an admin or organization would say, I really want my users to have this particular feature, but your permissions is too prohibitive or too open. And so is there a new customizable permission, customizable role based off of a addition of a permission that particular role didn't have in the past? So thinking about any sort of features or problems that your users have been requesting or requesting to be fixed, would this customization of these roles improve or offer that as a solution?
Okay.
And that's kind of where you want to think about that mapping, is that from an information architecture perspective, if I were to start from most secure to least secure, how would I want to map that?
Okay. Sorry. Most secure, least secure. Why am I mapping? Am I mapping the person or the feature, or?
So Andy had a good example. Let me find it real fast. I think he might have deleted it. It was kind of like a mapping of the information architecture and how you would want to present access to a feature based off of it needs to be highly secure or it's a simple feature. And then how do you categorize those permissions that currently exist as part of that? It might have been the reverse, least secure to most secure. I have to go back and see what he did. But yeah, that's the idea, is that you want to offer users the ability to have more granular control over the feature and what their users can access in that feature.
Would every action be like toggleable in the future?
So the long-term dream is that permission table with just check marks everywhere at some point in time would be completely toggleable. So any permission that didn't exist for a particular role would in the future have a checkbox, and they could just check that, and then that new role that they create would have that access to that permission.
The reason I asked is the way you were describing before, from least to most security, I almost see it as like a form of like progressive disclosure, where it's like, okay, at level 1, this is all you can see, like, yes. And then developer, oh, you can see more, you can do these actions and you can do that. And then deeper down, like owners can do more. And it's like, there's an action down here at owner that perhaps a guest should never be able to do. So that's why I said, is everything gonna be toggleable, or will there be rules or scenarios that we say, yep, like some of these things just stay at this level and should never be toggleable at this level?
Mhm.
Is that something that we should be highlighting as we go along as well?
So that's part of the mapping exercise, is that what makes logical sense to fall into a category, right? In terms of top level to bottom, if I were to disable something or restrict something at the top level, subsequently, what is also blocked, right?
Okay.
And the idea being is that at some point in time, offering total flexibility for admins to do whatever, making their own custom permissions with their own caveats, but within logical restrictions. So the example I always use is, if you were to disable access to view the source code, subsequently you would no longer be able to view merge requests, view code snippets, view anything within code relation. But that's not necessarily logical, right? It's just an extreme example. But that information architecture and that flow doesn't exist in our platform. And that's kind of what we want to try and identify, those instances of that kind of problem and see, can we kind of fix that to where we can offer those features disconnected from that cascading behavior, right? Or if that doesn't make logical sense, we can say, that doesn't make any sense. You have to be able to restrict it to this particular entry point, and then subsequently you would be blocked further down, right? There's no logical reason for it to be turned on all the way at the bottom without having access all the way at the top, right? So that's where this information architecture exercise comes in, is like, how are these mappings supposed to be done? What are they supposed to look like? From your experience with your users, the jobs to be done, the requests users are asking for, what sort of changes need to be done in that?
Yeah, this is going to be tricky, because it's like, I probably have good knowledge of source code repository land, but not so much of merge request land. But then that example of turning off view code, if I map it out, and if Annabelle doesn't know like that I am mapping it a certain way, her scenarios may not match up, as in like view code is a given, like in code review. So it's like, how do we highlight cross dependencies between groups? Or
Yeah,
if pipelines are down, then in commits we wouldn't see it. And then
that's exactly what I'm afraid of, is that as an individual who started this project with the auth team and then the design pod, we do not have the knowledge across the entire platform for those sort of connections. So this is an opportunity for us to, live our values of collaboration. We definitely want to be as collaborative as possible with this project to make sure we find those opportunities where, like, my feature knowledge ends at this particular intersection, and I want to make sure I'm collaborating with other relevant stages and group members so that we work cohesively, right?
Okay. Okay, this is good. Well, what's the rough deadline that you wanted people to review or like look at this kind of stuff?
I don't really have a deadline for now. Like I said, I still want to make sure that we do some sort of documentation of the process first. But so I wouldn't say I have like, you need to be done by next milestone or next quarter. But it's mostly just as an FYI right now to start thinking about it and putting on your planning roadmap, just to say, okay, this is something that in the future a feature is going to come out, and we want to be available to integrate with that feature and offer our users new opportunities, new features that they didn't have in the past.
Okay, sounds good. So I have a OKR thing to be done, like this editing stuff by Jan 31 next year and next year. So I'll keep this in mind as I work on my stuff, and then yeah, there might be some good overlaps. So no, thank you for spending the time with me to go through this, because this is helpful for me, and yeah, helpful for you too.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I'm going to be having these little sync sessions with everyone, more or less. I'm hoping it gets more polished once I actually have a framework. But yeah, that's like, I'm glad you wanted to jump in early. And like I said, it doesn't have an ETA or a deadline, so to speak, but it's just something to start thinking about as we move forward.
Gotcha. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Cool. Well, it's good to see you. Thanks for spending time with me, and hope you have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.